I think folks are still being let in, so we will give it a second. Hope everyone's day is going well. Anybody in the waiting room, Wendy, or are we good to get started?
Right now, this is what we have.
Okay. Well, I think you know me. I'm Steve Fancher, the chair of the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. We are going to call the Wednesday, April 3rd board meeting to order. It's 1:04. Let's go ahead and do roll call.
Nancy Hendrickson.
I am here.
Steve Fancher.
Here.
Eric Mueller. I think I muted you, Eric. There we go. Here. Dave Ritma. Seth Reeser.
Here.
Ashton Simpson.
Present.
Lori Stegman. I saw you, Lori, but I didn't quite hear you. But
I'm here.
Great. Emerald Bogue. Corky Collier.
Here.
Michelle Altman.
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid.
Here.
Henny Stephenson.
Here.
Eric Molander.
Here.
Ed Washington. Bob Salinger. Heather King. Currently have 11 board members present. And I'm getting some background noise, so I'm going to mute anyone that's not actively presenting or talking.
Thank you, Wendy. All right. Before we get started and jump into the meeting, I'm going to give a little preamble because we are looking at first readings or first showings here of 3 ordinances, and it can get a little confusing kind of why we're doing first reading, second reading, what we're doing today versus what we will be doing at the next meeting. So I just want to get into that a little bit of the logistics and give you an opportunity to think about it and ask any questions kind of before we actually get into, excuse me, contemplation of the items themselves. So like I said, we have 3 ordinances on the agenda today. This is the first time we're considering them. So I do want to provide some background on procedurally. Ordinances are the laws of the district and are used to codify policies and financial impacts on district constituents, so our customers. Until now, the board has only considered resolutions, and resolutions are used to document board policy and authorization to spend funds. So more internal looking. Ordinances affect everybody in the district, outward facing. So a little more importance of having notification to the public, having adequate time for them to review materials. And that's why you have a first reading and a second reading. Oregon statutes require that any proposed ordinance be read at 2 separate board meetings. Just mentioned that. The purpose of the agenda items for today, they're first readings of these ordinances and discussion. We'll see these ordinances again at the April 18th board meeting, where there'll be dedicated time on the agenda for discussion and an actual vote. Since staff sent the draft ordinances out last week, we've received some minor edits to 2 of them, the first 2. Jeff Condit, who actually drafted these ordinances for us, reviewed the suggested edits, and his edited and redline versions were sent out to you yesterday. Those are in the board packet. We'll be asking you to take 2 votes today. And this is where it gets a little confusing. We're not voting to approve the actual language of these ordinances today. We're just voting first to avoid a lengthy meeting. We're asking for, I'm sorry, I'm going to reorder these. First, we're looking for a motion to accept the minor edits as changes to the draft ordinances, just so that in the public record, again, these draft ordinances are the first reading are the actual ordinances we're going to be considering next meeting. The second item I'm going to be asking for you to do, and this is to avoid a lengthy meeting where we have to read word for word each of the three ordinances. We'll be asking for a motion to authorize the reading of the ordinances by title only for the three ordinances. So that's a little confusing, I know, and that's why I wanted to describe this and give you an opportunity to ask questions before we get into the first readings of these ordinances. So I see Mary Helen's hand up. Go ahead, Mary. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Just because I won't remember what you said tomorrow, can we get a copy of what you just said?
Yes, you can. I will type that up and get that sent out to the whole board.
Okay, thank you very much.
Questions, comments? I know that we haven't been through this ordinance process before, so this is a kind of a new thing, and you may have questions about process and what we're approving or what we're authorizing or voting on today versus the actual language in the ordinances next time. Was that clear to folks? Okay. Go ahead, Eric.
So what's the value of reading it word for word? When is that necessary? When is it, worthwhile use of everybody's time?
Maybe I'll defer to Allison. I think my own opinion on it, just really quickly, high level, would be that technically you're probably supposed to read in the first reading the whole thing, but by motion of the board and by acceptance of the board, you can consolidate that because everyone has it in writing. But go ahead, Allison.
Sure. Oregon law provides that the reading of the entire ordinance can be waived if everyone agrees. So I think in every place I have ever been the attorney at, we have always had it as a practice that it's just read by title only. Since we don't have formal practices yet here, I would recommend that we do have a formal practice that just requires first read by title only and second read unless someone asks for it to be read more fully. So Mr. Melander, you're correct. It doesn't really serve a purpose except that state law requires that there be an acknowledgement by the board that it just be read by title only.
Thank you.
I see Dave Ripma has joined us. Welcome, Dave. Wendy?
And Heather King as well. I just wanted to comment. I believe the reading word for word dates to prior to the digital age, and so there's less need for it now.
Okay.
If I may make one other comment, because we are at the first read and the changes have already been sent out and they are clerical only, I don't believe that there's needed a vote to accept those changes because we haven't introduced anything yet. So the ordinance as amended, as was just sent out with some minor clerical changes, doesn't have to be voted on. It's really just, we're just voting whether to read it by a title only. And then we will do that if that is allowed, and then we'll just do the same thing with the others. No discussion. That's for the next time we actually hear the ordinance.
Okay, gotcha. So we only have to do one board action before we get into the actual ordinances themselves, and that would be.
I apologize, Steve. So just to ensure public notice, Jeff Condit did ask us to vote because we previously had publicized the prior version of the proposal. So Allison, do you think it does any harm to just do the vote?
If it does, if it doesn't pass, I guess I don't think it's necessary because this new version has been published as well. But Jeff wrote the statute, so I saw his email. I think he was thinking it was for the second read, but you can go ahead and do that if you want.
Okay, let's see here. So at this point, if there aren't any other questions, but feel free to ask any before I get to the next part here. We're looking for a motion to accept minor edits as changes to the draft ordinances as they were first distributed. Tanny, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a quick question. Is there any time frame that this has to be published before we can vote on it?
State law requires that ordinances be read at 2 separate meetings, at least 6 days apart. So that is the time notice required by state law. Under state law, local districts ordinances, once passed at the second, if they got passed at the second meeting, they take effect 30 days later, unless it's an emergency, which has different rules and can allow just one reading. For example, emergencies require a unanimous vote, but otherwise it's the 6th day and then the 30 days for effective.
And we also noticed with full title as appropriate, it's required to be posted between 4 and 10 days before this meeting. And so we fulfilled that requirement as well.
Thanks.
Thanks, Emily and Allison. Mary Helen and then Nancy.
I'm not finding a red line edit from Jeff Condit. Said it was in the original packet. Can you just tell me?
Mary Helen, those are the ones I emailed to you today that you said you would print out.
Yeah, I did. Okay, so I thought
that's-
those were just Eric Mueller's. Okay.
No,
So they're both.
those are the ones suggested by Eric and approved by Jeff Condit.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
And special thanks to Eric for those edits. Nancy?
Credit to Justin from the county who also had edits. Thank you, Justin.
So I was gonna make a motion that move to amend the draft ordinance to include the language documented in the amended ordinance. Is that the one we're supposed to be doing first?
Yes.
Okay, I move.
Thank you.
Which
Nancy.
ordinance are you, sorry to interrupt, but is this for 2024-01? Because there's changes to 2 ordinances.
Okay, yep, 2024-01.
And I'm wondering if it would be helpful at all in the chat for us to put the 1-sentence motion that we're after here. Is there somebody that would be prepared to do that? I know Nancy just made a motion. I didn't catch it verbatim. Just for the record, it might be
that in the chat.
Thank you, Allison.
Okay, I'm reading it off the paper, so.
Oh, you have it in front of you. I'm sorry, I was lost. I'm the only one lost here. Thank you.
It's okay, but the clarification of 2024-01
There it
could
is.
go in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. So Nancy has made a motion to amend the draft ordinance to include the language documented in the amended ordinance 2024-01.
I second that.
Second it.
motion.
Okay, I heard Rochelle first for the second. So we had a motion from Nancy, second from Rochelle. Same motion. Any discussion on this?
And since I still have my hand up, can I go with my discussion piece?
Yeah.
I'm just noting that I looked through, it looks like all of the amendments are clerical and so I feel good about that.
Thank you, Nancy. And just to clarify, we're only approving the amendments to the one ordinance. We have 2 that have amendments. Are we doing the second one next or okay? So
And
just
I might point out, that's why it's a little odd to move to amend. We're not actually voting on anything with the ordinance. So it's really just what is going to be read as the first reading is what we are, I guess that the interpretation is that Jeff asked for that to be moved on, but really we're just voting. They can be changed at the second reading. We'll do the full-on debate like we do with resolutions. This is really just to provide public notice as to what we're going to be voting on the next time.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. So I think I'm just gonna, any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Now we're looking for a motion to amend the second ordinance that has edits to it.
Actually, Steve, I think we're gonna just do the development review ordinance and get through all that first before we move on.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chair, I would refer to the next staff recommended motion of, I move to hold the first reading of ordinance 2401 by title only.
thank you, Eric. We have a motion from Eric to hold the first reading by title only of the referenced ordinance. Do I have a second?
Second.
So-
It's the motion on page 2 of the packet.
Thank you, Eric. So motion from Eric, a second from Corky. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And now you would just read the ordinance name by title only, and then we'll be done with the first reading of that ordinance, and then we can move on to the next one. Do the same thing.
Okay.
I believe Wendy is prepared to read that title, Mr. Chair, if you'd like.
That would be great. Go ahead, Wendy.
An ordinance creating a development review service charge structure and methodology and authorizing service charges to be set by resolution. Ordinance number 2024-01.
Thank you. And now we will move on to the next ordinance.
Okay, so the next ordinance.
The motions are on page 23 of the packet.
Thank you, Eric. Let me get there. I didn't anticipate that I was going to be the most confused person in the room by the packet here. So, okay, on page 23, there we go. So, so the recommended motion would be, if somebody makes it, is I move to amend the draft ordinance to include the language documented in the amended ordinance. And this is ordinance 2024-02. Go ahead, Lori.
Steve, I did want to point out to our board members that in addition to some clerical changes here, there was a change to the population measure that will be used to do the allocation. So originally Jeff had written this ordinance to include the census data, which is every 10 years. Thankfully, Eric did point out that PSU does provide this data on an annual basis, and so recommended the change to use the annual population data that is calculated by PSU rather than waiting for an every 10-year change to that data. So that is a little bit bigger change than a clerical change. So I did want to point that out so the board members were aware that change to the document.
Excellent. Good catch, Eric. Agreed. Wholeheartedly. Go ahead, Corky.
Just want to confirm, Lori, that it's that change and then the one change of more than the greater of, and that's it, right?
That's it.
Thank you.
So everything that's redlined in the document, those were the two changes.
Okay. Looking for a motion.
I'll do it.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I move to amend the draft ordinance to include the language documented in the amended ordinance of 2024-02.
Thank you, Nancy. We have a motion as stated from Nancy. Do I have a second?
Sure.
I'll second it.
That was like tie, but I'm gonna, I saw Corky first, I guess. So I'll say we have a motion on the table from Nancy Hendrickson to amend the draft ordinance as stated. We have a second from Corky Collier to do the same. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I would move to hold the first reading of ordinance 2024-02 by title only.
Thank you, Eric. We have a motion to hold the first reading of ordinance 2024-02 by title only. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Rochelle. So we have a motion by Eric Mueller. We have a second by Rochelle Altman to hold the first reading of ordinance 2024-02 by title only. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And now
Now-
Wendy
go ahead.
would, yeah, go ahead, Steve. I was just going to say that Wendy will go ahead and read that ordinance by title only.
Thank you.
Before the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, ordinance number 2024-02, an ordinance enacting an intergovernmental fee under Senate Bill 1517 from 2024.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, I think we're on to the third, which does not require any edits. It didn't require any edits, so we don't have to consider a motion to consider the revised version. We just have to consider a motion to hold the first reading of ordinance 2024-03 by title only. So if anyone, go ahead, Eric.
I just said so moved. You had stated it, so.
All right, so we have a motion from Eric Mueller to hold the first reading of ordinance 2024-03 by title only. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Eric Mueller, a second from Nancy Hendrickson to hold the first reading of ordinance 2024-03 by title only. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and read that. Ordinance number 2024-03 of the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, and ordinance adopting and applying an assessment methodology under Senate Bill 1517 from 2024.
There's
Thank
a
you, Wendy.
reporter from PBS on this call.
Go ahead, Jim.
I just want to say thank you to the board for your patience as your staff learns how to address these ordinance issues and procedures around them. I appreciate your patience.
Wow.
And thank you for struggling through that. Appreciate it a lot. Thanks very much. thanks to Allison and Wendy and others who did all the research to figure out how we were supposed to handle these things. So again, much appreciation to all of you. Thank you for your patience as we worked through it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. So we've been through the technical piece of this and taken the board actions that we need to take. I assume now, let's see, it's 1:28. We have, is this the time that's open for discussion, questions, or not?
And I have a presentation too,
Oh,
Steve.
great. Go ahead, Lori.
Yes, and
And
with
I-
respect to the ordinances, we won't be discussing or debating those until the second reading.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Lori.
All right, let me share my screen. Oh, if I could do that. Wendy? Let me know when I can go.
It should be good to go now, Lori. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, can y'all see my screen? Great. Let's see if I can try to see you. That's always good. All right. So today we had the first reading of the ordinance defining the assessment methodology for the urban district. For our discussion today, I'll be reviewing the options available to the board in relation to assessments. And I just want to acknowledge, I know that there's been more interest in getting some detailed information on what those assessments by property will look like. We do have Tiberius working on that data. And I have begun some of the review of the data, but it is definitely still in process. It is our intent to have that information ready to go out with your packet next week. Gosh, it seems like these meetings are coming fast and furious. So you should be seeing that information shortly. I apologize that it's taken time, but it took time to pull the budget together. It took time then to put the budget information into the calculation. And as you will see, it is a pretty complicated calculation. So with that, I'll get started with my slides. So Senate Bill 1517, which held legislative updates for the urban district, was signed by the governor last week. Yay. Great news. The legislation included criteria related to the transfer of assessment authority from the legacy districts to the urban district. First, the urban district needs to select an existing assessment allocation methodology. This approach allows for the transfer of the assessments without needing a vote of the people to continue assessments already in place on the floodplain. The existing methodology will be adopted by ordinance. There are 3 existing assessment methodologies, one currently used by SDIC and MCDD, one and being utilized by Penn 1 and one being utilized by Penn 2. We will review in the next slides the pros and cons of each approach. So the SDIC MCDD methodology is the method that the board has been considering for use by the urban district. All analysis provided to date to the board has used this methodology. It covers the vast majority of district properties, and although the calculation is complex, it utilizes factors that are regularly tracked, can be substantiated, and are readily available to us each year in performing that calculation. The Penn 2 methodology includes a calculation of gravel area on the properties within the floodplain. This data has proven to be a bit inaccurate and also is not currently available for properties outside of Penn 2. This methodology also includes a transfer of costs from riverfront properties to smaller homeowners that are not on the riverfront. And this has and continues to be an equity issue for properties within that district. Given these factors, staff has not recommended using the Penn 2 allocation methodology as we've gone through this process. The Penn 1 allocation methodology uses data that's readily available as it uses property square footage to allocate the assessments. It does not consider impervious surface impact on the stormwater system. So let's take a look at the Penn 1 allocation compared to MCDD. So this slide shows the comparison of the MCDD/SDIC methodology and the Penn 1 allocation methods without consideration of the impact of compression. So as we know, compression does impact what the final bill looks like to the property owners. This is just the initial allocation of the assessments using those two different methodologies. As you can see, the Penn 1 method actually results in a shift of allocated assessments from MCDD to Penn 1 and SDIC. Pretty significant shift to Penn 1, which I would note, be pretty much taken up by compression. So we wouldn't see that revenue in the district, but the allocation does do that shift. And that's because it's not looking at the impervious surface of each of the properties. The assessment allocations at all legacy districts are impacted each year by cost factors. Costs in the budget are evaluated annually to determine which costs are flood control, stormwater peak, and stormwater average. I know that we've walked you through the calculation in the past, but if you don't see it on a day-to-day as we do here in the finance office, it's hard to remember all of these complicated allocations. So what happens is when the projects change each year, the assessment allocations change to align with that year's projects. And we actually walk through every single line item in the budget. We work with our engineers and with our planners, our project managers, get a good understanding of what they've included in the budget for those line items, and then make some decisions about how those costs allocate across the cost factors. The annual rate increase historically has resulted in a range of rate changes to landowners, depending upon those changes in cost factors. And what I do promise, I started to look at today, what I do promise to bring to you next time is to take a look at some of those historical fluctuations, because it is definitely interesting to see that the properties, even if we have a 0% rate increase, there are some properties that are winners and some that are losers in that. And so you'll see a change in rates for those properties, regardless of whether there's a rate increase, because of these allocations, these cost allocations that are occurring each year, and looking at the nature of the work that we're performing. The board has received a number of estimates related to assessment revenues over the past 18 months, and the most recent presentation was provided to the board on December 14th. We're currently working with Tiberius Solutions to complete the analysis of the assessment allocations and compression impacts using the proposed budget for the urban district. And we have walked through and done those cost allocation factors using the proposed budget. So that is all being included in this newest analysis that we're performing. We are going to share that information with the board. That should come in your packet. I'm working hard to make sure that we've done our quality control efforts and made sure that those numbers are not looking odd. We do that by property. So we do know that the board members are interested in this information and need this to be able to make their final decisions. So that information will be coming out with your packet. In addition, we've heard some questions from the board about how do I, as a board member, answer questions from property owners when they get their bill and they're seeing a difference in their assessment. We do want you to know that we do regularly respond to questions from property owners when they have them about their assessments. Typically, we'll get a few calls each year from those property owners, and we'll walk them through the calculation for their specific property. We're also formalizing some information for you as board members so that you'll know how to help those property owners get to us so that we can respond to those questions about the complicated allocation. So we will have a specific phone number for you that you can provide to property owners, as well as an email address for questions. And then Colin and his team are working on some website content as well, so that we'll be communicating as best we can to our landowners as to what's happening with their bill.
And
as
Lori,
I said,
just to punctuate, we're going to provide that website content in multiple languages. So Mary Helen, thank you for that suggestion. We haven't forgotten, so we'll make sure and look at what the languages are in the district and make sure that we cover those. So again, thank you for that suggestion at the past meeting, Mary Helen.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Sorry, I missed that piece. This slide shows our steps for adoption of the assessment methodology. Today's board meeting was the first reading of the ordinance. Board members will receive the updated assessment analysis to provide you with further information related to impacts of the current year projects on those cost driver allocations. So that's coming with your next packet. The second reading is scheduled to be held at your next board meeting as well. So I'll be doing a presentation and we'll be doing the second reading. At that meeting, the board will be asked to consider adoption of the ordinance. So with that, that is the slides that I've got today. I'm going to stop sharing.
Go ahead, Jim.
It's unnecessary. That's right. I lowered the hand. It was too fast.
Well, thank you, Lori. That was extremely informative. I'll admit I've never really understood how the fluctuations in the rates are because of the different projects that are done each year. So that, to me, that's really helpful information. In some ways, it helps mitigate some concerns about, changing bills from past methodology to this one, as fluctuations. If landowners are accustomed to fluctuation, then it's a little less concerning to some degree. So thank you. Eric. You're on mute.
I'm going to unmute myself. Just a suggestion for Colin and his team on the website, if they could provide the ability for the homeowner to calculate what the new assessment is going to be versus the old one, that's going to be very, very important. And it'll also be a time-saving capability for the MCDD staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, the only other thing, I've gotten a couple of pretty thoughtful comments. I think Corky, you had suggested this, and maybe some others, that when we run this analysis, if we see small businesses or individual properties that are really impacted by this one-time shift to a different methodology, we could probably work with the board and support the board in coming up with some tools that might assist those people. But once we get the analysis, we'll have a better idea of what those impacts might be. We think they'll be consistent with historic changes, but again, the staff's prepared to support the board if you guys want to go into some sort of a mitigation scheme that would provide some financial assistance. We'd have to think through how to do that. We can't change the rate that we charge based on individual things, but there are other tools that are available to this board and our agency to support people who may be adversely impacted, should you choose to go there.
Thank you, Jim. Mary Helen?
I'm glad Corky suggested that, because that was something that came up with large landowners in Pen 2, specifically TMT and Vanessa Sturgeon. My other comment is there the possibility that we can engage the city translators to provide this information to people that could read it in another language, their native language. And I know Nancy had suggested that that the city does that. So there are many people that aren't going to understand what this is, and so they won't be able to understand what's going to happen to them. And as I've said before, I believe in the view of our equity as part of our mission, we need to provide that service to people. So I'd like to suggest that happens so that make that available.
Thank you, Mary Helen. I'll follow up with Nancy and learn the specifics of the city's program. We do have a language line that's available to us 24/7 to consult with translation issues. So we have similar services. The city may be better, so I'll make sure and follow up with Nancy to understand what they do. But we do have services available should we find that need. And I do appreciate you bringing that up. It's very important.
Well, just one thing to add on to that. I have a pretty much non-English speaking neighbor, and they called MCDD and were told, got information about a phone number. They had to call the phone number. The phone number spoke with them and said they had to set up an appointment. for people that are working 2 jobs, and that's sometimes impossible. So that's why I was hoping that it could be like, and Nancy can explain more, or anybody else, click here to get the get Spanish or whatever language is identified. But that was the purpose of that, because it was whatever the information that they got from a staff person at MCDD to call a phone line for translation services. They had to be able to identify what they wanted, but they couldn't because they couldn't understand. So that was a little bit difficult. And I don't know how it works, how the service works, but that was just feedback from someone that tried to use the service.
Thank you, Mary Helen. I mean, I'll offer up that any properties, homes or businesses in Gresham that have need, we will offer up, City of Gresham will offer up our translation services. We have staff that provide those services for some languages. We don't cover all languages, but I know we have Spanish, I think Russian, and maybe a handful of others. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I was Glory Baker. I was curious about this bullet item that says under the Pen 2 method, transfer of costs from riverfront properties to small homeowners. What riverfront properties are we talking about?
I don't have the list in front of me, Eric.
I think they're the ones that are
Right,
built right on the levee that use that linear footage calculation, if I'm not mistaken, but we could pull that list for you if you'd like.
Right, so are those the floating homes that are actually on the South Channel?
No, I think they're the ones that are actually built on the levee, and they get charged a linear frontage rather than a full square footage, is my understanding. But I want to be cautious here. I'm not the expert, and we can get the expert to describe that for you if you'd like.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, because there are some homes on Northeast Marine Drive that could be construed to be on the levee that would be impacted by this. And I just want to make certain that the homes that are actually floating homes are not the cause of the problem.
Yeah, they are not. I'm clear on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
I just had a quick, I guess it's a question, but reading, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong item. I'm on the fee, not the, to the cities, not the assessment. So I'll wait for that. Questions, comments on the assessment methodology? Go ahead, Nancy.
Thanks. Too many buttons. I just want to be clear. This is not really so much a question on the methodology as on our process, which is we're discussing it this time during its first reading, and we're going to vote on it next time, but also have some more time to discuss if we need to at our second reading. And that's what these second readings are about. You can discuss both types. And that's what we're doing. So just being sure.
And I think the other thing I would note, Nancy, is that we're going to bring you some additional analysis with the current proposed budget, because that translates into some small shifts likely in various properties assessments.
So we get that next time during the second reading?
Be in your packet is our goal.
Great, thanks.
Dependent on some consultants. Just want to remind you. I think that's all staff has for you today, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so if we have any questions about the development review portion, or the other one, the fee to cities, is now the right time for that or not?
Sure, and I also wanted to remind the board members that it would be most helpful to your staff if you could get us your budget questions and send those to Steve and me so that we can get to work on those and have answers for you ahead of time. You may ask questions about the budget at any time, and I want to make sure you know that. You don't have to get them in advance. We'll take them as they come, but to the degree that you can get them in early, it will help us be prepared. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, so I just wanted to I just want to make this comment. Okay, so for the development review, I think we're basically taking it from the legacy districts, bringing it into the new district. It's just a, so I got nothing to say about that. And then for the FSB, which I guess we're not getting a presentation on today. It's just the resolution saying they're going to have that, and it just like it is in the legislation. So am I right about that?
That's correct, Nancy, and we have provided presentation related to the fee in the past, and there will be some information, some similar information in the budget presentation at the next meeting.
Got it. Thanks. Then I have nothing more to say at the moment.
Thanks, Nancy. Go ahead, Mary Helen, and then I'm going to ask a question.
I just have a question. In the unfortunate incident that the ballot measure for the GO bond does not pass, will that have any reflection on budget forecasts and what will happen? Or because we're saying we're going to do all these things and this is what it's going to cost and this is development review, but if that funding is not available, is there like a plan B, or am I just not? I understand they're separate. I've been told that before, but the ballot measure is saying that people want to pay the assessments or support the new districts. And now it says I'm done talking, so lower my hand. Okay.
Mary Helen, I think there were multiple questions there, so let me try
Okay,
to
but I
answer.
think the gist of it, it's like, if we don't get the funding from the bond, then what?
So you'll see in your budget, which is a pretty fat book, there are different kind of sections of money. One is the general fund, and that's where all the general operations happens, and that's where the assessments in the flood safety intergovernmental fee are. So the resources for our regular operations are the assessments in the flood safety fee. That happens regardless of what happens to the geo bond. So that section of the budget is the operations, our regular operations. Then you're going to see a section in that book that's for debt service related to the general obligation debt. We have to do that because if the bond passes, we will be having to make payments back. And so there's a smaller budget that refers to those general obligation debt service commitments. And then you'll see the section that has the general obligation capital projects. And I think that's your question, is what happens if that geo bond doesn't pass? We don't have to change the budget, because if you don't get the resources, you're just not going to spend the money. So we've left that in the budget because we need the capacity if the bond does pass. If the bond doesn't pass, then we will, as staff, need to look for other funding resources to be able to continue our work on PMLS. And we've had conversations with the state, we've looked into other grant options, but clearly that will be a challenge for us from a financial perspective. And some of those projects will get delayed likely if the bond doesn't pass. So I hope that clarifies kind of the pieces of your question, but let me know if I didn't make sense.
No, that was fine. It's just me constantly beating my drum for a business continuity plan. So spent a career doing those kinds of things. But it's just foremost in my mind, what do we do if this doesn't happen? And hopefully we won't have to have a plan B, and we'll get all the money we want and people will give us more money. So
I think the good news is day-to-day operations will be able to continue. The capital program would be impacted if the bond is not approved by the voters. So,
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So my question is more just a clarification, just make sure that we're all on the same page. And this is for the cities. So Eric, Nancy, Seth, Dave, Ritma, the ordinance says that the district will provide the cities with kind of the annual amount due notice by July 1st of each year. And then there's quarterly payments due September 30th, December 31st, March 31st, and June 30th. So I assume the first payment for us will be due September 30th. Okay, I just want to make sure, because it didn't say that explicitly in the ordinance. I just want to make sure that I wasn't getting it wrong. So it's September 30.
Correct. And that was in the cash flow also, Steve, and the numbers have not changed in the budget from those original numbers that we talked about with each of the cities when we were talking about the fee. So it's the 6.262 million. And the allocation is still using those same population numbers that we had initially. So the numbers at this point look the same as what you've seen for the last few months.
That sounds good. I don't know if it'd be worth the efforts, or if how we would do this logistically, if we need a subcommittee, but the cities might benefit from meeting with each other to talk about how we're planning to turn around and charge our customers. So if there's opportunity for collaboration or continuity or something, it seems like we would benefit from some of that discussion. Not to say that's on you at all, that's on us, but if we were to get together separately, are we violating borders? Or I could assign someone from Gresham, they could assign someone from their respective cities to get together, I suppose, and then we're fine. But go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, if you'd like staff to try and do the logistics to pull something like that together, we could. I'd also remind the board that the proposed budget includes funding for a revenue task force, and that could be, I would assume the cities would need to be part of that task force since we're asking you to collect. So that could be another useful venue for that sort of collaboration. And the board will be tasked, this board will be tasked with setting that up relatively soon. So we want to get it going this summer. Just another idea.
Right. Thanks for the note, Wendy. Are you getting that echo from my audio? Oh,
Sounds very chair-like in its way, though.
Lots of reverb.
Well, then I'll stop talking. That's great for me. Any other questions, comments, discussion? Keep going. In fact, I'm going to hand over the reins to Tammy or Nancy, whoever wants to take it, if I'm reverberating here.
A question for staff, just to clarify, our next meeting is April the 18th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I don't miss things.
1 o'clock with the optional lunch prior, and I believe we're back at the port in April.
And we're going to be having the second reading and the either passage or failure of the 3 things we talked about today, plus we're going to be talking about the budget. And maybe doing the first reading of the budget.
You get your presentation on the budget.
Okay. Shall we adjourn?
Well, real quick, and this is very minor, but I found a typo in the edited version of one of the ordinances. This is page 25 of the packet. It references the Urban Flood Safety Water District. You might want to change it to the Water Quality District.
Thank you, Steve. We'll reflect that change.
Okay. Well,
if there's nothing else, I just want to do a quick, I know that as we're moving ahead with a really substantial step, that there's a lot of questions, a lot of feelings, a lot of emotion. So please bring these things up as early and as often as you can, and we'll do our best to elevate those things to the full board where appropriate. Also, I've been attempting to step back a little bit and think about where we are in the landscape relative to Hurricane Katrina, and thinking through $100 million in federal money, $150 million, hopefully, from the voters of Multnomah County, $50 million from the state, an extra $7 million every year coming in and operating off the floodplain, outside of the floodplain, are all really significant benefits for the folks on the floodplain. And I just wanted to stop for a second and acknowledge the hard work that everybody has put in to get us here, and still the hard work yet to come as we get closer to some really tough decisions for you all. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and try and remind you of the bigger picture of all the resources that the floodplain is going to receive as a result of your excellent work as a board and all the work that came before this board was established. It's I find helpful to me on a hard day to step back and look at the bigger picture occasionally, recognizing that in the fine details, there's still a lot of stress and some hard work that we still need to do. So thank you for letting me say that.
Well stated, Jim. Thank you. Mary Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, just one last thing for today. Will there be some sort of assessment inventory of who landowners are in the different districts? Because I know when we had our annual landowner meeting, many landowners that lived there were not identified, so therefore couldn't get a proxy vote. So I know you use Multnomah County records, and I went through huge effort to try and do that. I don't know if other districts have that problem. So I just wondered, will we miss anybody because Multnomah County doesn't have the records right? And if will the flexibility, I mean, do we have to pass the budget before that TSCC meeting on May 1st for them to approve? So that's kind of like the big major deadline that we have to meet. So if we have only the April, 18th meeting, will we meet several times? I'm just trying to get things so that I can juggle between doctors, personal things and
you have your budget now, and there'll be an opportunity to discuss and ask questions about the budget at a next meeting, and then there'll be a meeting where you'll be voting on approving the budget. Then it goes to TSCC. Once TSCC approves it, it comes back for final adoption.
So the TSCC hears it on May 1st and then approves it, or that we need to?
Forgive me that this is confusing, and this hits a spot that's been confusing, I think, for a lot of people, Mary Ellen. There's a TSCC hearing on the GO bond, which is separate from a TSCC hearing on the budget. The May 1st TSCC hearing is the TSCC's meeting. It's their hearing on our GO bond.
Oh, okay.
And then you guys will approve the budget. They'll take the approved budget, hold their hearing. Once they've approved your approved budget, then you formally adopt it. So there'll be 2 rounds with TSCC, once on the bond, once on the budget.
And we're required to give them our approved budget document 30 days prior to when they're holding the budget hearing. So the budget hearing is on June 5th. I'll have till May 5th to get the entire approved budget document ready for them. And our meeting is on May 1st. So there's not a lot of turnaround time, which is why we have the meeting scheduled the way we do. Their board of commissioners, who all have other jobs and other responsibilities, do a lot of these budget reviews, and they ask that they have 30 days to be able to pull together, to review our budget book and pull together the questions for the hearing.
And hopefully I'll be able to be out in public by June 5th, but will there be a Zoom capability of video for that meeting? Okay.
Yep.
Absolutely. And then your other question about identifying all of the properties for assessments, we actually successfully made through the boundary definitions with both the state and the county. Angel, thank goodness for Angel. He actually hand delivered all of that documentation on the 29th and got the stamp of approval. So the county has all of those boundaries correctly defined, so we won't be missing any properties. But thanks for that question, Mary Helen.
No, I mean, it was a big issue for TMT during the landowner meeting, and who owned what and what property. So, okay, and where the notices were being sent. So I think that's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Somehow people always get their property tax bill, don't they?
Sometimes, and then they get in trouble when they don't get it. So,
that's for sure.
Go ahead, Dave.
Are we going to get copies of the presentation that Lori had? You might have said, but I missed it.
Yeah, that was in your packet.
It should have been in your
It's
packet.
in the packet. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't believe it was, Lori, if that's probably my fault, so I'll send it out this afternoon.
Okay, you had it in time to send it out.
thank you.
Sorry, the version I saw had it in there. My apologies, Counselor, if I misspoke. I didn't intend to.
I think it was in the very first version. It wasn't in the subsequent.
Go ahead, Danny.
My regrets for the trouble.
Yeah, and I was gonna say for those packets, if we could kind of reconcile those a little bit, just for the record, make sure they're both consistent. Because the presentation, I think, was in the one that went out on the 28th, but it wasn't in the one that came out last night.
Thank
So,
you, Tammy. Duly noted. My regrets. We did that.
Okay, and so what we're looking at is budget questions are going to go out to Jim and Steve, and with Steve gone, to Nancy and I, and we need to get those in as soon as possible. So those are ready for the 18th. And then additionally, on the 18th, we're going to discuss the methodology or do those ordinances, and you're going to have some more detail coming out from that, right? Because the stuff that we did in December 14th, and I think we talked about this, it was all Portland stuff, and we were just hoping to get something for the little people out where the wind blows.
I think we did it for everyone, but what's different is the cost drivers are now fully updated to reflect the proposed budget. That's the only difference, but we did a variety of properties across the floodplain, Tammy.
For the 14th?
Yeah, we looked at all the different districts and how they were impacted by the shift to the MCDD methodology. And we gave you some sample properties that were from different districts. But again, we're going to bring you updated analysis.
Okay, because I'm looking at the 3 examples from that packet, and they were all had City of Portland.
Okay, my regrets if I've misspoken again. I thought we provided a range of different ones that were from different areas. And I know we provided some additional ones to the SDIC board at one point, but we will make sure and have a good distribution of sample properties for you.
Okay, and it's just it'll just be a lot to for us to tackle at one meeting, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions.
And go to Nancy, and then we'll look to possibly adjourn. Give you some time back.
This should be pretty quick. Tanny, you just said that the budget question should come into Steve and you and me, because Steve's going to be out, but I'm actually going to be out too all next week through the 17th. So happy to get copies of questions, but we need to make sure that there's a through line and nobody gets blocked anywhere.
If you'll copy me, I will make sure that our team gets all of the questions and that we prepare responses to all of them and share them with the entire board. I also want to stress that if you have questions that occur to you at the meeting or after the meeting, it's okay. Please ask them. So there's no deadline on your questions, but the sooner you can get us questions, the easier it will be for us to respond. So that's, again, please ask your questions whenever you have them. I just really want to make sure you know. We'll take them as they come, but the more you can give us advance notice, the easier it is for us to provide thoughtful responses.
Can I just make a fast comment? I really like what you just said. We'll share them with you because that parking lot, I tried to go through that, and the last time it was updated was September 2023. And so I know a lot of people have asked a lot of questions, and I've said before, I don't know the questions to ask, so I really benefit from those. So if there's some way to document that and send it out, I really appreciate that.
We will definitely do that. Thank you, Mary Helen.
Steve, did you have a question about the development review? Because we did ask McKenna to jump back on in case somebody had a question about development review.
No, I did not.
Okay.
Just if folks did have a question, I want to make sure they knew they could get into it.
And again, we're just
Okay.
moving the existing one over.
Perfect. Well, this is a rarity, but it's 2:08, and unless somebody protests vehemently in the next 3 seconds, I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you again, everybody, for the struggle with getting through the first reading matters, and I just appreciate you helping us learn how to do ordinances. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's it. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Yep.
Thank you.